Today we're going to talk about the cell cycle, and the goal of this video is to describe the steps of interphase and mitosis. So first, what is the cell cycle? The cell cycle is the repeating series of events that cells go through during the course of their life. There are two major phases of the cell cycle, interphase and M phase. Cells spend most of their lives in interphase, and the cell spends only a small fraction of its life in the M phase. So in this picture here, you can see one cell at the top, and follow the arrows. There's a series of events here that form this cycle. The part that I've highlighted in green, this represents interphase, the series of steps that the cell goes through during interphase. And then this part that I've highlighted in orange represents the M phase. Okay, so I told you the cell cycle consists of two phases, interphase and M phase. So let's look at some of the details here about what happens during interphase. Interphase is divided into three stages: G1, S, and G2. The G that you see stands for the word gap. So G1 is the first gap phase. Then comes S. S stands for synthesis. And then G2 stands for the second gap phase. So you go G1, S, G2. And you can see that in the image here. G1, S, then G2. So what happens exactly during each one of these? Well, during G1, the cell increases in size. So it grows, and it makes the mRNA and proteins that are needed for DNA synthesis. During the S phase, chromosomes get replicated. So we call this DNA synthesis. Essentially, a copy of the DNA, of all the DNA in the cell, is made during this phase. And then during G2, there's rapid cell growth. So the cell grows even more. And there's also protein synthesis. So proteins get made. And the cell is preparing for mitosis in this step of interphase. Okay, so that's what's happening during interphase. Overall, here's what you need to know about interphase. The cell increases in size, it carries out its normal activities, and it replicates its DNA in preparation for cell division. Okay, so now let's talk about M phase. I told you the cell cycle consists of interphase and M phase. We just talked about what happens during interphase. Now let's talk about what happens during M phase. So M phase includes mitosis and cytokinesis. This is the phase where the parent cell divides, producing two daughter cells. And that's what you can see in this image on the right. At the top, you have one cell. That cell is going to grow during interphase and then divide into two cells. So M phase is where the cell actually divides and forms these two daughter cells. Notice the chromosome number in the parent cell and the daughter cell remain the same. So in this image, these sticks, both the red sticks and the blue sticks, each stick represents a chromosome. So in this parent cell, you have 4 chromosomes. Notice in the daughter cells that you produce at the end, each daughter cell also has 4 chromosomes. So the number of chromosomes in the parent cell remains the same in the daughter cell. Now, in animals, mitosis takes place in somatic cells. That's any cell of the body except sperm and egg cells. So every single cell in your body is going to do this, except sperm and egg cells. And in plants, mitosis takes place in the meristem. A meristem is a region of growth like the tips of the roots and the shoots. Okay, so I told you during M phase, the cell does mitosis and cytokinesis. So in this last part of the video, I want to show you what happens during each of those steps, during mitosis and during cytokinesis. But before we do that, I'm going to use some terms that I want you to be familiar with. So here are some important terms about structures in the cell that you need to know. So first, here's a piece of DNA. You've probably seen an image like this before. When you take a long string of DNA and you wind it up, you form this kind of coiled structure. This is called chromatin. When you pack or condense a lot of chromatin together, you then form a chromosome. It's kind of shaped like an X. So in the remainder of the video, I'm going to talk about chromatin and chromosomes. So I want you to be familiar with what I'm referring to. When I'm talking about chromatin, I'm just talking about this long string of DNA. And when I'm talking about a chromosome, I'm talking about the coiled up chromatin that looks like this X shape. A few other important structures here. So what you see in this box is one chromosome. But one chromosome is made up of two sister chromatids, and I've highlighted those in different colors. So on the left, there's a sister chromatid, and on the right, there's a sister chromatid. And then the thing that connects the two sister chromatids is a centromere. Last bit of important structures, and then we'll get on to mitosis and cytokinesis. When you're looking at one cell, so on the next slide, you'll see some cells. At the ends of those cells, you're going to see centrioles. I've labeled them in the image here. So there's centrioles here, and there are centrioles here. Then these strings are called spindle fibers. The purple X, that's a chromosome. The chromosomes, in this case, they're lined up along the equator of the cell. That's just the middle of the cell. So those are the major structures that you need to be familiar with. Okay, so now let's finish up by talking about what happens during mitosis and then cytokinesis. So first, mitosis. So mitosis has 4 steps or stages in it. The first step is called prophase. That's what you see in this image. Then metaphase here. Then anaphase. Then telophase. So these represent the 4 steps or stages of mitosis. Let me tell you briefly what's happening in each stage. So during prophase, chromatin condenses to form chromosomes. The nuclear membrane, that's what these white dashed lines are. So these chromosomes are inside the nucleus, but the nuclear membrane during prophase starts to break down, and that's why you're seeing these gaps appear. These centrioles move to opposite poles, and spindle fibers start to form between the centrioles and the chromosomes. So all that happens during prophase. During metaphase, the spindle fibers attach to the centromere of the chromosomes, and the chromosomes line up along the equator of the cell. An easy way to remember what happens during metaphase is to remember this phrase. M is for middle. So notice that metaphase starts with the letter M, and all the chromosomes are lined up in the middle of the cell. So whenever you see a cell where all the chromosomes are lined up in the middle, you know that it is metaphase. Okay, so now anaphase. So during anaphase, the sister chromatids separate due to the shortening of the spindle fibers. The spindle fibers function similarly to a fishing line. So you're like reeling in the fishing line, and that's going to pull these sister chromatids apart. And those sister chromatids then move to opposite poles of the cell. So the sister chromatids right here are going to move to the top, and the sister chromatids here are going to move to the bottom. An easy way to recognize this phase is to remember this. A is for away. So notice anaphase starts with the letter A, and these sister chromatids are moving away from each other. So A is for away. Telophase, let's move to it. So during telophase, chromosomes uncoil and begin to form chromatin. And also notice those white dashed lines are reappearing now. That's because the nuclear membrane starts to reform around that chromatin. So notice now I have 2 nuclear membranes reforming. So there's one up here and there's one right here. So an easy way to recognize telophase is it looks like you're about to get two cells. T is for two, or you get two new nuclear membranes forming. Okay, so now let's finish by talking about what happens during cytokinesis. So in animal cells, the cell membrane of the parent cell pinches inward along the cell's equator until two new daughter cells are formed. So you can see how we have one cell here with, so what you're seeing on the left, this is telophase right now. You have two new nuclear membranes that have formed around the chromatin. And during cytokinesis, that cell membrane is starting to pinch together, pinch inward until you get two new cells. Now, the place where they're pinching together, we call that the cleavage furrow. So that's what happens in animal cells during cytokinesis. But plant cells are slightly different. So in plant cells, a cell plate forms along the equator of the parent cell. So that's what you're seeing here. A cell plate starts to form along the equator of the parent cell. And then a new cell membrane and cell wall form on each side of that cell plate. And this results in two new daughter cells forming. So the place where that plate forms along the equator of the cell, that's what we call the lamella. Okay, so in this video, we've seen that the cell cycle consists of interphase and M phase. Interphase had 3 steps, G1, S, and G2, and M phase consisted of mitosis and cytokinesis. And we've looked at the steps that happen during mitosis and what happens during cytokinesis.